Hi, welcome to Unapologetically You. And specifically, we are talking hybrid performance for female leaders. So, in our last episode, we talked about extreme exhaustion. Kelly and I were talking about our own experiences with how we felt exhausted in our profession and the ways that we tackled the exhaustion, how long it lasted. So today's episode is really exciting because this is our part two of exhaustion. So, how we felt exhausted, but what were the habits that we picked up on when we were exhausted? Because it tends to happen on an unconscious level, right? Later on in this episode, stay tuned because we do have a surprise guest who talks about her experience about exhaustion, particularly in sport. And then we're going to have a surprise question regarding why women feel they need to do beyond what's expected. So stay tuned for all of those facets in our podcast. And yeah, let's get started. Hi, Cal. How are you?
Hey, Charles, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very well, actually. And I know we're going to talk about exhaustion today, but how is lockdown? What's going on over there? Like, how are you feeling with everything? What's the trend at the moment with everybody in lockdown?
Fatigue trend for everyone. So I do a lot of online coaching. Well, everything's online coaching now. So even the Paralympians are online coaching. So and I have a vast group of people who mainly need rehab, so traumatic brain injury as well as Parkinson's disease and things like that. And the fatigue is the overriding description that everyone uses. And I guess it was the same when you were in lockdown too, right? Is that how you would have described it?
I think it's an overwhelming sense of exhaustion, fatigue, brinking on burnout. But I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes with everything, with trends especially, that people latch on to these terms or terminology without fully understanding the depth and breadth of what
That
it
is true.
entails. So I feel like rather than jumping on the bandwagon, it's trying to understand how we're feeling, what our emotions are going through, but also adapting to this new level of norm. Like it's okay to feel these things. It's okay to feel anxious when you may go out in public. For a lot of countries who are opening up, it's okay to not want to do that. It's okay to then have this time by yourself if you feel that this is the new normal that you can sink in with. I know for me, especially, being in the gym and waking up at stupid o'clock in the morning, that was my norm. And now I'm
Yeah.
like, actually, I like spending time by myself, going out for walks, reflecting. And then it's giving me energy to have conversations like this. Because sometimes, well, Zoom can be draining, right? The actual
Oh, sure.
conversation.
Absolutely. Do you have a routine for yourself?
Oh, for sure. Like talking about exhaustion, I never had a routine. Like my routine would revolve around work. It would
Yeah,
be how
sure.
much sleep can I get? Because I was so exhausted. How much sleep can I get? And then it was like, how little time do I need? Like I'd pack my bag the night before, especially if I was training or, like work stuff, right? Make sure my food was prepped. But it would be like maximum time to sleep, roll out of bed. I was really lucky because I'm only like I was 10 minutes away from the factory. So I could then
Oh,
roll out of
I've never
bed.
lived minutes from work.
I know it's insane. And
Yeah.
then I could be at work and then my whole day would just be there. So there was no real routine. But the reason I built that routine in was after I discovered, well, I'm like, I can't sustain this anymore. Like, I am so tired. What did you find when you were, on the brink of exhaustion? Did you have a routine then?
I was too tired to have a routine.
Yeah.
And like you say, your focus is on that. Well, not let's say call it 9 to 5. It's never 9 to 5, but let's call it that 9 to 5. But that's where your focus is, and you just focus on getting there. Especially in sport, you might think this block is going to be this, and then head coach will change it. So
Yeah.
your day was not as routine as you just got to learn to know that whatever it said it was going to be, it was really going to be totally different.
Yeah.
And then you finish at the end of the day. Now, in Australia at least, the I did not live 10 minutes from work, so the commute home was at least an hour, and if traffic was bad, 2 hours. And then after that, you're just, like you say, you're just looking forward to sleep.
But you know what I did? Like, because obviously we were going to talk about habits, but for me in particular, my bad habit was I'd go home, I'd switch my laptop on, do a little bit of work because I was like, well, I wouldn't get distracted at this point. So all the administration or all the things that I need to tie up, especially when it came to like coaches' schedules, I could just do that in some peace and quiet because we had an open office like most coaches do, right?
Yeah.
But we were also sharing the office. So it's really, really hard to then turn away a client when you're kind of doing some concentrated work. So I'm like, go home, maybe have some dinner, open my laptop and start working. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm exhausted. I want to sleep, but let me just check my emails. So I'd be in bed, my phone next to me, and just be like, oh, let me just get through some of these emails. And I don't know why I did that. Maybe I just felt like I just needed to keep on top of things. Did you ever do that?
Sure. Not so much emails, but the part where you said maybe have dinner, I definitely did that because a lot of the times you're too tired to eat and then too hungry to sleep in a way. So if you did eat, it wasn't good, dense, nutritious.
Oh, no.
That I took a while to cook. It was whatever was there.
Or you could throw into the oven, right? That was the key for me. Like, what can I throw into the oven from the freezer?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's not nutritious and that's not good for you.
Yeah.
So there's the downward spiral right there.
Mm-hmm.
So without nutrition, you don't sleep well, you don't get the best out of anything that you do. I have a graph here, and I read it in a book a long time ago, and I cannot even think what book it was, but it said you cannot sleep yourself out of bad nutrition, and you can't eat yourself out of not enough sleep. There's another one: sleep, nutrition, and hydration, and you can't drink yourself out, or hydrate yourself out of a poor diet. So those three things are so important, but they're equally important. So you can't eat poorly but sleep to make up for it.
Yeah, and talking about bad habits, it's funny because what I didn't know then is even though I was exhausted and I would easily go to sleep quickly, I would wake up at like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, but I'd be like, oh, like, what time you should get up or you need to get up to leave for work. So it's just like, oh, I'm going to be exhausted tomorrow. Just brain switch off so I can go to sleep. But what I didn't realize at the time was the effect of blue light regarding my melatonin. Like, as a coach, you think, well, that's what your hormones do, right? It's what your body is naturally regulating to. It's like your body is the equivalent of a sunset. You need to wind down. You need to get into that dark zone. Your heart rate is lowering. You're actually in a more peaceful, quietened state, and you'll be able to get to sleep, right? But if you are buzzing, like say, for example, you took a run you ran for a mile and then put yourself to bed, you're never going to sleep, right? Because your body's just buzzing with all that energy and adrenaline. And I feel like that is the same for when you look at your phone before bed. So the quality of sleep, the quality of REM, the quality of slow wave sleep isn't going to be as effective. And then that then has a knock-on effect the next day regarding concentration and focus and energy. And that's when I picked up the afternoon coffees or like sugar, because I'd be like, well, I can't nap. Can't nap.
Yeah, I know. So many times I could have. Yeah, I just wanted a little bedroom, a little nap spot. But yeah, no, same. And I'm not a coffee drinker, but the sugar hit, I would have gone for that sugar hit. And something you said there really peaked for me. But anyway, let's move on because I'll probably remember it down the track.
Yeah, but it's almost like you go through these habits, but you don't recognize those habits, right?
Sure. And then you stack them, right?
Yeah.
And there's poor sleep, and then there's blue screen on top of that, and then you'll stack your sugar and your coffee. And that's what I was going to say, the hormonal cocktail. So your hormones, they're not the same for everyone. Your hormonal cocktail is different from my hormonal cocktail.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, if we do go for a run before we go to sleep, or what I've done before is we've got a gym in the garage. So I'll jump on the bike, tiring myself out. But like I said, you're putting stress on yourself, physical stress, but there's cortisone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cortisol. And so you've got that dumping. It's supposed to be a drip feed, but you have just dumped it into your body, which now has to try and dissipate that, or put it all use it all properly while you're trying to sleep. And that hormonal cocktail and sleep actually don't go together.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to wake up as your cortisol is peaking, and then it's sort of supposed to stay stable over the day. But you've used it all at nighttime. You wake up, you actually don't have the cortisol high enough to wake you up properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the rest of the day, it'll spike with any kind of stress. And what is there? We went through it last week: physical, mental, emotional, environmental, financial.
Yeah, that was it.
So when any of those happen, you spike, and then you dump. Yeah, spike, dump. So this is your day, right? And how do you sleep when your hormones are like that? And that's just the beginning of
if you do that for the 8 to 10, 12 hours during the day, well, your body won't be able to adapt for the night, right? It's still spiking. And if you think about the reliance on sugar or caffeine or even alcohol before bed, those stimulants will aid that peak. So even if you may not sense that your hormones are doing this via cortisol, you're doing it via the environmental, nutritional, all of these things, and even emotional. If you think about those peaks in terms of, we have to be quite flexible in our day regarding coaching, right? So some days could be easier than others, but most of the time it's, okay, the client has to reschedule, or you need to do something else for the team. You need to think on your feet. There's no lax in that environment. And with each coaching session, we have to be quite flexible with what we're implementing. Because if an athlete comes in and they've been exhausted, well, that program is obsolete because we're not listening to what they need at that time. And that needs to then change. You need to be on the ball when trying to do all of those things. And having those things stacked upon each other, as well as your cortisol levels, going around like a roller coaster, well, then you're not being as efficient or as productive as you possibly can be.
Nowhere near it. Absolutely nowhere near it. So yeah, but you don't realize that you're spiking your cortisol and dumping into a trough, because that feels, by that stage, that feels normal.
I think you're just you're in a phase where you're just, I think you mentioned it last week, just focusing on the one thing, because you're just in that cycle of like, you can't get out of it. You are literally just one step ahead of the other, and things are just on top of you. And you're just like, well, there's so much to think about. I'm so exhausted, but things need to get done. So let's just get on with it. And you're just ticking along. And then those things that you've accumulated as bad habits, well, you can't change them because you haven't got any energy to change them or any awareness to change them. And this is where, well, we've come out of the other end, but it's taken years to build those habits, to formulate those routines, from our own experience, but also from our education, from our research, from what's currently happening in the industry. But a lot of people will Google it, and we know that may not necessarily navigate them into the right advice, right? But actually going back to, it's also overwhelming, and there's so much going on that we can't possibly change, let alone be aware what's going on. Why do we feel as women, especially women, that we need to do it all? Why do we have this thing of, especially women with children, and Kelly, you'll be able to answer this more than I can, but you've got your job, you've got the burden of, I say burden, but I use the term loosely, of financially providing for the family, for the household. Then you've got, the childcare, you've got the household duties, things that you probably, especially taking care of family members. It's almost like everything's being collated, and women have this pressure not only to succeed in the work environment, but also manage things within the household. And then you're talking about why women need to work harder than men. So there's kind of two entities that it's almost like we're in a tug of war, but who's on the other side? Like, who are we at war with?
Who's on the other side? You are on the other side. There's a Kelly on each side of that, because I think the pressure came from myself. I don't think anyone else put the pressure on me to be a wife and a mother and a full-time worker. In truth, I think it was me. But I wanted it all. And I think we're kind of stuck in that generation where, did your mum work when you grew up?
Yeah, she had like 3 jobs.
Holy moly. Okay, so my mum didn't work, but she looked after 5 children. So she did work, but she didn't get money for it. Let's put it that way. So it was not a paid role. And I think having a mum who grew up being a full-time mum, but then me going to uni and wanting to use that education that was very expensive to build a career, and then you have a baby and you will never love anything more than you love your own child. Promise you that. So you want to be the best person. You want to care for this baby 24 hours a day. You stare at them, you waste so much time looking at them, touching them, kissing them, smelling them. And then there comes a time you've got to go back to work. So, well, in Australia it's a 12-month maternity leave, and then you can go back to work. And like you say, the burdens then of childcare and the emotional guilt of being away. So that's emotional stress of being away from your baby, your child. What I guess you'd call environmental stress of that extra job that has to be done within the same amount of time that you've got available to you before the working day starts. So there's a stress there. That's 2 extra stresses that you never had before. And then financial stress if you go back part-time. So you tend to live to a certain level, right? And then if money is halved, which it was for me when I went back part-time, you have to be careful not to live below your means, right? If you've got to do that. So there's financial stress, emotional stress, physical stress. I didn't have time to put myself under any physical stress. Did I work out? No, I did not. I couldn't. I didn't have the time or the energy. And work itself was mental stress for me. So we've already described what our days are like through the lens of sport. Having said that, I'm sure any industry, I'm sure any woman listening to this will go, that's not just your day, my dear, that's my day as well. And so the chaos that comes with that day is that 5th element of stress. And who put that stress on? On me?
But then on the flip side of things, I know a lot of women have had to go back to work and go down to part-time, because obviously with childcare, if you're not as lucky to pay for full-term childcare, but also they choose not to, because it's like, this is the only time that they're little, they want to enjoy that time with their children, right? You do want to try and find whatever balance you possibly can. But with work, what tends to happen is, I know for some women I've spoke to that they've said they've gone down to part-time, but whether they are working full-time or part-time, the work still needs to get done, because they're the only ones who have to do it. So it's basically saying, well, we'll take the full-time workload, put it into part-time, but it's still down to you to do it, which means that there's this overwhelm to do it, because it's like, well, nobody else is going to do it.
it's waiting for you there. Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't mention that probably because I didn't really have that happen to me, but certainly it's happened to many people I've worked with. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, for sure. And this is the thing, it's going back to why women feel the need to work harder than men. But yes, we need to prove to ourselves, but also I feel I've had this conversation yesterday with a friend, and we were talking about the expectation we put on ourselves, but also the stereotype that we're put under in terms of what about when we are thinking that we can't do it all, not us, but it's expected, well, we have to prove ourselves that we are emotional, or, we can't. I don't know what to say. I feel like I'm tongue-tied in this one, because it's almost like it's a social expectation, it's a self-expectation, but also what other people feel. It's almost like we're being judged of, oh, she's a mother, she can't do it, but then I'm going to have to prove I can do it. But nobody's actually said it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You just explained it really well. So yeah, we do feel the need to work harder to prove that we can do it, and we are proving it to people who don't care, who've never expressed the fact that you need to prove it, but we still feel that need, and you're definitely proving it to yourself. And you prove it. Well, I would have been proving it to my mum, saying I don't, I can work and look after my baby as well as you did. Not that she ever said it. She never said anything like that. So this is why I keep coming back to, I set those expectations for myself. And people might have in the background been saying, it's hard to have a woman in a full-time role if she's a mother or if she's hoping to have children, because the maternity leave is a big gap anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there were times when I wanted to leave early to see a special occasion at school, and they always let me. They always did. But man, the guilt that I would feel, or it's like I had to deliver bad news. And in truth, they're like, oh my God, go, go, of course, go and see your daughter graduate or whatever it was, go and see her in the Christmas concert. But the guilt I felt leading up to asking and actually asking was something that, again, I just put on myself.
But you raise a really interesting thing there. I always figured that women feel guilty leaving, like some of them want to leave them because they're like, oh my goodness, I need time out, I need my own time.
Well, you do as well, absolutely,
adults,
no judgment there.
but they still have that guilt of, oh, I'm not spending enough time with the children, or when I'm home, I'm not present enough, like I'm always on my laptop on emails, like I'm not able to be with them. But what you've just said is the guilt actually in not being in work either and doing that work. So actually, it's not just guilt. And I know we've, a lot of mums will have guilt not being with their children and not having quality time with them. But then there's actually guilt of not being in work to a degree, but also being as effective as you used to be or can be. So actually, there's two sides. So it's never really balanced, is it?
It was never for me, never balanced, no. And the guilt came from wherever I allowed it to come from. If someone said one little thing, I would take it as a big critique of my mothering skills or of my work ability, of, why are you rushing around everywhere? I'm like, oh my God, my whole life is a rush. I don't get a chance to sit down. It's all coming back to me. Look at me.
Oh my
but
goodness,
yeah, it's stressful just talking about it, because it was a stressful time, and I never used the word exhausted. I never told anyone I was exhausted. I never admitted it to myself, but I would say I'm tired, and I looked tired. Oh my gosh. My brother-in-law once told me I looked haggard, and that was a turning point.
Oh no. This is the thing, it's always friends or family giving you that intervention, isn't it? Just to say, okay, you don't seem your usual self, and you look tired. You're like, great, thanks.
But that's what it took for me to really sort of click and go, all right, so it's not just me feeling it. I also look at to other people, and they're starting to or feel brave enough to comment. So yeah, that was a turning point for me.
Yeah.
And I
So
looked at humanity.
I mean, yeah, that's a great compliment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what we're going to do now is we are going to move over to listen to our special guest. So she is featuring in this episode today. Catherine King is basically talking about her experience of exhaustion and what she felt and how she got through it. So here's a little speak on our special guest talking about what she has gone through. Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for coming back onto the podcast and delving a little bit deeper into your experiences and your situation when it came to exhaustion. So could you just tell us about, how you felt exhausted, what preempted that state of exhaustion and the story behind that?
Okay, well, it was a long story for me. So really, it started when I was in university. So I was going to university, I was working full time, and I was volunteering as an athletic therapist. I was also volunteering with the National Strength and Conditioning Association as well. So I was burning the candle at both ends. So I would go into work in the morning, then I would go to university, then I would go back to work until like 10 at night. On weekends, I would be on the rugby field. I was working 7 days a week and studying. And I did that for years. And then when I graduated from university, I felt, lost. I wasn't sure what to do with myself. So I was still working my job that I had for a long time. And then I got a second job. So now I'm training clients at 6 a.m. and I'm closing another facility at 10 p.m. And I was no longer working on the weekends, and I had stopped volunteering with rugby. But I was still only getting like 4 hours sleep at night. Like I'd be going to work, and I'm surprised I didn't get hit by a car because I was so just out of it. So I did that for, I don't know, a couple years. And then I just hit a breaking point when my one job changed my schedule. So I no longer had my weekends off, which also meant that I no longer had the ability to see any of my family or my friends, because when I was working, they were off. Mm-hmm. So it kind of completely removed any social life or family life I had. All I had was work. And then there were some other really stressful events, and I couldn't cope any longer, and I crashed and burned. I ended up going on a stress leave. So that was my experience with exhaustion. Definitely, I was only, getting 4 hours sleep a night, and I had injuries that would never heal. I felt awful, like my body hurt all the time, like every single joint hurt. And there I am telling clients about how to, live this healthy life where they're supposed to be getting 7 to 9 hours sleep, and they're supposed to be hydrating adequately and having really good nutrition and exercising and moving throughout their days. And there I am, injured and broken and exhausted and just really unwell.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like we are very bad examples of health and well-being coaches and strength and conditioning coaches, because we are burning candles at both ends, as you just so rightly said, but also we are supposed to be examples of good health, and we're supposed to be that image and icon of this is the example and follow what I do. But actually, how exhausted did you feel presenting that facade?
Very. um, yeah, it is difficult when you can't even spot your client or demonstrate exercises correctly, or I couldn't do Olympic lifts because my shoulders and my knees were just not functioning. So there were some safety issues too with my job because of the state that I was in from working and working and working and working and just not taking the time to recover myself or heal. So yes, it was, you're trying to put on this illusion of health and well-being and performance, and basically you're kind of lying because you're not doing it yourself. And then that's stressful in itself because you're wondering, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I so injured if I'm supposed to know what I'm doing? So it was very challenging and stressful. And I felt trapped and stuck, and I didn't know how to get out of that at the time.
Now, what made you raise that awareness that you felt stuck? Like, so obviously you've described that you've done a lot of hours, you've accumulated those hours over the course of years, and obviously you've got a high work ethic. But then what made you do so many hours in work? You know, was there a passion that you were driving towards? Or was there an end goal, an end game? And then also when did you realize actually this is unsustainable?
Well, I was definitely trying to get all of the knowledge and experience that I needed. Because of course there's so much pressure on you to be everything. You know, you have to know about facility design, you have to know about rehabilitation, you have to know about injury prevention, you have to know about Pilates and yoga and Olympic lifting and all of these different things that you have to be an expert in, which is completely impossible. You also have to have management skills and budgeting skills and all of the stuff that is really unrealistic for one person to do. So I think, when I ended up going on stress leave, well, I felt stuck before that, but I didn't see any opportunities to get out of where I was. So I did find my opportunity, and that was grad school in another country. So that is one of the reasons why I ended up going to the UK for grad school, was I was escaping. It was my out. It was my opportunity to heal myself and get out of that burnout that I was in. And of course, that also became my dissertation, was burnout.
And how did that relocation help gain that clarity and the recovery that you needed? And how long did that recovery take after burnout?
I'm gonna say recovering from burnout was maybe 3 years, 4 years. Maybe an ongoing process.
And that's a very long time, right? And did you overcome that by yourself? Did you know who to go to regarding support and help?
It was definitely my own journey. I mean, I did research burnout and, why it happens and that kind of thing. And again, being the experts on everything, we do look at nutrition and sleep and recovery and all of that as well. So I think mostly, just removing myself from the situation I had put myself in was the biggest key to it.
And that's the thing, like reestablishing your own goals. And that does take a long time to kind of form those habits and come out of that situation. And as you so rightly said, it had been a process. it takes time and it takes years to overcome that. And I feel like for women in particular, they end up thinking that, as you so rightly said, they have to do it all. You end up having this burden or this expectation. I don't even know where it came from, whether it's societal or whether it's specific to our gender. So having that expectation to do it all, or think that we've got it all together, and having to do more than what is needed, more than what our opposite sex does. So in terms of that, why do you have an opinion of why women end up doing that?
Well, I think there's a few factors in that. There's the factors that we're supposed to manage the household. We're supposed to take care of the children and do the laundry and do the cleaning and do the cooking and all of that, and have a career. So there's those expectations. And then I think the other side of it is that, I mean, maybe this is a personal bias, but it seems like men just show up and they're respected and they're seen as being authorities and competent and confident. Whereas when we show up, we have to prove ourselves because we're not given that respect. We're not seen as an authority. So I think that the combination of those factors lead us to constantly be feeling like we have to prove ourselves and working harder just to get the same opportunities that men may be getting without that extra input and work on their part.
Yeah, you make a really good point, especially when you said about having to do more than what's expected. It's almost like we're already coming in as an underdog and we have to prove that we are more competent, more knowledgeable, we are professional in what we do, but it's almost like it's not a given. Whereas many men probably have that expectation of a natural born leader or things like that, whereas those traits aren't common among women, as we are labeled as nurturers or empathetic or more compassionate and things like that. And yes, they can be strengths, but we are typing a certain gender, which actually isn't true, because we're all human. We all have our strengths and characteristics that make us individual. Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing, how you've actually got to that exhaustion phase, but also the length of time that you came out of it. But just one final thing is, did you have any bad habits that I know Kelly and I were talking about our bad habits, about, having the phone next to our bed and, doing that last minute scroll or checking emails. And that doesn't do, give us benefit when we need that sleep. And you barely had sleep when you were working multiple jobs. So did you experience any specific habits that you made yourself aware of and then tried to whittle them out as you were going through that process of self-discovery?
Well, I think my worst habit is saying yes. So I would say yes to other people, even if it was detrimental to myself. So learning to say no has been a work in progress for me. That was definitely my worst habit. But yeah, definitely our phones and the internet is not our best friend, and trying to, replace the habit of scrolling through the phone with reading a good book is what I'm working on still. And yeah, of course, it was always really hard to unwind and be able to go to sleep. So trying to replace some of those habits of using electronics or eating or drinking or whatever in the evening with maybe meditation and that kind of thing, just to help unwind. Because, when you've worked 16 hours, 18 hours, and you need to get to sleep, but you can't because you're so stressed out and suffering from insomnia, you have to try everything to get back on track. And saying no was the big one for me.
Yeah, for sure. Creating those boundaries and making sure that you're adhering to them and getting people to adhere to them as well. So you're not caving when it comes to placing certain boundaries in certain situations. But yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your views and your experiences on exhaustion. And I'm so happy to have you back and share that with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Wow.
Interesting perspective from Catherine there, right?
Oh, yeah. She brought up so many things that I was nodding along with, as you saw. And so many things resonated. And then she brought up some other things that I didn't necessarily feel or experience in my own journey to exhaustion and out of it. What about you?
I was nodding along as well with her. It's funny because it's almost like we've had that similar experience. We can always resonate to a certain degree with somebody else, especially because we are working in sports. We do understand the hours. But when it came to when she said she needed to escape, I found that quite surprising in a way, because I forgot about that when I did it myself. Like when you are so much in your own head, or things are just so overwhelming environmentally, emotionally, all of these different triggers that have accumulated in terms of the overwhelm, the exhaustion. Yeah, you do feel like escaping, but then you realize it's still in here, like it's still in here, and it's in your head and your heart. You can't just escape from it because it's sitting with you, right? So what things you can change. And I'm really glad that she mentioned the habit of saying no. And I'm still working on that myself.
Oh, same. And I have said this about myself many, many times, but she said the same thing about herself. We will both let ourselves down before we let someone else down. And in fact, you have been so helpful for me with that, whether you know it or not, because there are times when I just couldn't do one of the podcasts that we'd had scheduled, because you are such a good you are so good at scheduling and knowing what you're going to do.
You were going to say regimented, weren't you?
I was, and yeah, you got it. But my life is more chaotic than that, and changes, so quickly. And there were times when I couldn't, and I felt terrible and quite stressed about telling you that I just can't do it today. And you'd go, "That's okay, love. We'll change it." And I'd go, "I love her. I love her." You do. You make things you're so helpful. But then at the same time, it made it harder for you. So I recognized that you saying okay to me and letting it be okay for me made it harder for you. So I don't know what the balance is there. Me saying no, I can't do it right now, and you going, "That's okay," is more like you're letting me let you down.
The thing is, it's almost like I just hit the table then. We have to learn the boundaries within ourselves and within each relationship. And that's different. I feel like there's a lot of people who struggle to have that boundary with a boss, because it's almost like, well, I don't know if I can say that, or am I allowed to do this? And what's the boundary with this, right? Yeah. And then when you look at friendships, again, I'll openly admit, I'll be vulnerable and I'll say, like, I failed to create boundaries with relationships, even with friendships in particular, because I didn't know what they were. I didn't know how to exert that. And it's about learning what works for that other person and learning what you want as well, and not being afraid to say it. I feel like we, between us, have developed this newfound creating boundaries with one another, but I think that comes with trust and honesty, and I value that in every relationship. Like, if people can't be honest or truthful with me, then I don't know what you want, or I don't know how to accommodate that. So it's almost like setting yourself up for failure if you end up not telling me the truth. Well, I don't know how to manage that expectation of yours. But if you're honest and you're saying, right, this is unmanageable for me, or I'm unable to cope with this, well, there's nothing we can do in that scenario, right? It's almost like setting expectation on the circumstance and then dealing with that new situation. So when you say, I can't possibly do it for today, I know you don't do it off the whim. So it's saying, right, actually don't cancel for the sake of canceling because I feel like a pushover, but also saying, you're not that type of person to do that, to abuse that statement or power. And then looking at the new situation, then I have to step back and go, okay, so what's this new situation? How do I deal with this? And not putting too much emphasis on what's happened, right? Because a lot of people then end up feeling resentful for saying yes or no, or, not speaking their truth. And I feel like that can then sometimes be a conflict. And that's where some people then end up saying, oh, I wish I just said no, because then it's uncovered this whole Pandora's box of emotions when you're like, oh, I feel so torn within myself, either saying yes or no, but they're not being honest with themselves or within that relationship.
Yeah. I just have a client who always tried to pay me more money. And I go, no, it's okay, because I love helping people. And she'd say, there's going to come a time when you're going to start feeling like you're being taken advantage of because you're not charging enough money for the service you give and the results you get. And I've always remembered that. And she always would give me more money or pass it on and go, oh, that could be for next week as well. But then she'd pay me again the next week, right? So bless her, because she taught me a lot as well about recognizing that, yes, I'm actually starting to feel like I'm being taken advantage of. And that's also a tipping point for a lot of people, whether they recognize that is or not. When you start to have that feeling that you're giving more than you're getting, which is being taken advantage of, right? Mm-hmm. That's when you've got to find your voice and speak up about it or do something about it.
Yeah.
And I love all of your ideas that you're starting to put out on Fitness Chicks. Is it Fitness Chicks platform you're putting it out on?
Yes.
Your videos? Yeah, about ways to handle that. And your new course.
Yeah, for sure. And there will be a new course coming out. So we'll save that for the next episode.
I know it's kind of secret and it kind of came out. But
it's kind of dragging along. So I need you guys to stay in touch, stay in tune for our third part of this exhaustion episode. And that's where we're going to start to talk about the disturbed sleep, the lack of concentration, the brain fog and fatigue. So amalgamating it into cognitive behaviors and outcomes because of that. So it'll be a little bit more scientific, but me and Kelly thrive on that, right? So if you did enjoy this episode, please share this with your family and friends. That'll be very much appreciated. And let us know if you've actually experienced any symptoms of exhaustion. So get in touch on our Facebook page or even on YouTube and comment below. So thank you so much for listening to our stories on exhaustion. And thank you again to Catherine for participating and being an exceptional guest.
Yeah, she's lovely. I like her.
So I'll catch you next time, Cal.
Yeah, you too, Tuls. You have a good weekend.
Yes, I'll see you soon.